The rain came down in sheets that night, each drop a tiny hammer against the earth, beating the world into submission. The kind of rain that blurred the line between sky and ground, between breath and drowning, between living and dying. She ran. Her feet slipped on mud and moss-covered stones, her lungs burning with every desperate gasp. Behind her, voices shouted through the storm. Cruel voices, familiar voices. Voices that once promised her safety and love. How quickly promises turn to poison when fear takes root in the human heart. Her name was Elara, or at least it had been. In a few moments, that name would sink to the bottom of the river along with everything else she'd ever been. The forest pressed in on all sides, ancient oaks and towering pines that had stood sentinel for centuries, witnessing countless deaths and rebirths. Their branches creaked and groaned in the wind, as if trying to warn her, trying to tell her to turn back. But there was nowhere to turn back to. Home was no longer home. Family was no longer family. The people she'd trusted had become her executioners. There she is! The voice cut through the storm like a blade. Marcus, her own brother, the one who'd held her hand through childhood nightmares, who'd taught her to skip stones across the village pond, who'd sworn to protect her always. His voice now carried nothing but hatred and fear. She pushed harder, her dress, once white, now brown with mud and torn at the hem, catching on brambles and thorns. Blood ran down her arms from a dozen scratches, mixing with the rain, washing away in rivulets that the earth drank greedily. The accusations had started 3 days ago. Mrs. Henwick's cow had died inexplicably. Then young Thomas fell ill with a fever that wouldn't break. The miller's well water turned brackish overnight. Small things, natural things. The kind of misfortunes that visited every village eventually. But fear needs no logic, only a target. And Elara had always been different. She saw things others didn't see. Shadows that moved wrong. Lights that danced in corners where no candle burned. Whispers in languages she'd never learned but somehow understood. Her grandmother had been the same way, before the village drowned her in this very river 70 years ago. History, it seemed, was a wheel that never stopped turning, crushing the same souls in the same ways, generation after generation. The sound of the river grew louder, that terrible, hungry roar of water swollen with rain, rushing over rocks and fallen trees, eager to pull anything within reach down into its dark embrace. She'd played by this river as a child, splashed in its shallows during summer, learned to swim in the quiet pools where the current slowed. But this was not that gentle river. This was something ancient awakened, something primal and unstoppable. She burst through the tree line and skidded to a halt at the river's edge. The water was black, churning with foam and debris, tree branches spinning in the current like the fingers of drowning men grasping for salvation. The far bank was lost in sheets of rain and darkness. There was no bridge here, no crossing stones, no ferry, just water and more water, and beyond it more forest that might hide her or might simply delay the inevitable. Behind her, torches appeared between the trees, orange flames fighting the rain, refusing to die, just like the hatred that drove her pursuers forward. "Witch!" someone screamed. "Devil's daughter!" She recognized Pastor William's voice, the man who'd blessed her at birth, who'd taught her scripture every Sunday, who'd smiled kindly when she brought flowers for the church altar. Fear turned good men into monsters more efficiently than any curse ever could. They were 50 yards away now. 40, 30. Elara looked at the river, then back at the torches, calculating her chances. Drowning versus burning, water versus fire, a cold death versus a hot one. Neither promised mercy. Her grandmother's words came back to her then, spoken years ago on a summer afternoon while they sat by this same river. The water remembers everything, little one. Every tear, every prayer, every drop of blood. If you're ever truly lost, if the world turns against you, give yourself to the water. It will take you, yes, but it will also take you somewhere. Trust the river to know where you need to go. At the time, Elara had thought it was just old woman nonsense, the kind of mystical rambling that made the other villagers whisper and cross themselves. But now, with death closing in from all sides, those words felt like prophecy. The torches were 20 yards away. She could see their faces now. Marcus, Pastor Williams, the blacksmith's son who'd courted her last spring, Mrs. Chen who'd taught her to bake bread, Mr. Torres who'd carved her a wooden doll for her 8th birthday, all of them transformed by fear into something unrecognizable, something that hungered for blood to appease their terror of the unknown. 10 yards. She saw the rope in Marcus's hands, already fashioned into a noose. She saw the stones in the pastor's pockets, meant to weigh her down after they killed her, to keep her body from washing up downstream and haunting them with evidence of their crime. They'd thought this through. They'd planned it. This wasn't mob madness. It was premeditated murder dressed up in righteousness. 5 yards. Elara made her choice. She turned and leaped into the river. The cold hit her like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs in an explosive gasp. The current seized her immediately, pulling her under, spinning her like a leaf in a whirlwind. She kicked instinctively, fighting for the surface, but couldn't tell which way was up. Everything was darkness and cold and pressure, the water forcing itself into her nose and mouth, claiming her as its own. Her dress became an anchor, sodden fabric wrapping around her legs, pulling her deeper. She clawed at it, trying to tear it free, but her fingers were already going numb. The river tumbled her over rocks and through rapids, each impact driving more air from her lungs, filling the space with icy water. She broke the surface for one precious moment, gulped air and rain, saw the torches on the bank growing smaller as the current swept her downstream. She tried to scream, but water flooded her mouth again, and then she was under, pulled down by the weight of her dress and the relentless grip of the current. This was drowning. This was dying. Her grandmother had been wrong. The river wasn't taking her somewhere, it was simply taking her. Period. End of story. End of Elara. Her lungs burned. Her vision darkened around the edges. She stopped fighting. What was the point? Even if she survived the river, there was nowhere to go. No home, no family, no future. Maybe this was better. Maybe this was mercy. She sank deeper, the pressure building in her ears, her chest screaming for air that wouldn't come. Strange lights began to dance before her eyes, gold and silver, swirling in patterns that seemed almost purposeful, almost like writing in a language older than words. And then, in that moment between life and death, between one world and the next, she felt something, a presence. It moved through the water like heat through cold air, like light through shadow, impossible to ignore. It had weight and power, and it was coming toward her fast. Her fading consciousness couldn't make sense of what she was seeing. A shape, massive and swift, cutting through the current as if the raging river were nothing more than a still pond. Golden eyes, bright as twin suns, fixed on her with an intensity that penetrated even her dying mind. She wanted to ask what it was, who it was, but she had no air for questions. No air for anything. Strong arms wrapped around her. She felt herself being pulled upward with impossible speed, the water parting around them as if commanded by some higher authority. Her head broke the surface and someone held her there, one arm like steel around her chest, keeping her face above water even as the current tried to reclaim its prize. She coughed weakly, water streaming from her mouth and nose but couldn't draw breath. Her lungs wouldn't work. They'd forgotten how. The world tilted and spun. She was moving fast now, faster than the current, carried by whoever or whatever had grabbed her. The riverbank approached with dizzying speed, and then she was being lifted from the water entirely, held against a chest that radiated heat like a furnace. She collapsed onto wet grass, every muscle in her body seizing. Her mysterious rescuer turned her onto her side, and she vomited water. So much water, it seemed impossible that her body had contained it all. Each heave was agony, her ribs screaming, her throat raw. When the water finally stopped coming, she lay gasping, shivering violently, her vision blurred and darkening. She tried to focus on her rescuer, but could only make out a tall figure silhouetted against the storm-dark sky, water streaming from broad shoulders and long hair. "Who?" She managed, the word barely a whisper. The figure knelt beside her, and those golden eyes came close, too close, impossibly close. Eyes that glowed from within, that saw everything, that carried a weight of years far beyond human measure. "Rest," a voice commanded, deep and resonant, carrying an authority that her body instantly obeyed. The last thing Elara felt before consciousness fled was being lifted again, cradled against that furnace-warm chest, and carried away from the river that had tried to claim her name. The storm raged on, washing away her footprints, drowning out her scent, erasing every trace that she'd ever existed. As far as the village would know, the river had taken her, just as it had taken her grandmother all those years ago. They would be both right and wrong. The river had taken her, but it had also given her to something else, someone else. The last chapter of Elara's old life closed with the river's roar. The first chapter of something new began in the arms of a stranger with golden eyes and secrets older than the force itself. Consciousness returned slowly, reluctantly, like a swimmer rising from the bottom of a deep pool. Elara became aware of sensations before thoughts. Warmth first. Blessed, wonderful warmth, so different from the river's deadly cold. She was lying on something soft, covered in furs that carried unfamiliar scents, pine and earth and something wild, something animal. A fire crackled nearby, its light dancing orange and gold against her closed eyelids. She was alive. That realization hit her with surprising force. She'd given up. She'd accepted death in those final moments beneath the black water. But death, it seemed, had rejected her, or been cheated of her. The distinction mattered, though her foggy mind couldn't quite grasp why. She tried to move and immediately regretted it. Every muscle in her body protested, stiff and sore, aching with the memory of her struggle against the current. Her lungs felt raw, her throat burned, and when she attempted to swallow, it was like swallowing broken glass. "Don't move yet." That voice again, the one that had commanded her to rest beside the river. It came from somewhere to her left, deep and measured, carrying an accent she couldn't place. Not quite European, not quite anything familiar, something older. Elara forced her eyes open. She was in a cabin, though calling it that felt inadequate. The space was large and open, built from massive logs that looked like they'd been standing as trees when her great-grandparents were young. The ceiling soared high overhead, crossed with heavy beams carved with symbols and patterns that seemed to shift in the firelight. The walls were hung with furs and woven tapestries depicting wolves running beneath a full moon, locked in eternal hunt. The fire blazed in a stone hearth big enough to roast a whole pig. Its light pushed back the darkness but didn't quite reach the corners of the room, where shadows pooled thick and watchful. And beside the fire, in a heavy wooden chair, sat her rescuer. He was massive. That was her first coherent thought. Not merely tall, though he was that. Easily 6.5 feet, maybe more. But it was the breadth of him that struck her. The sense of contained power in those shoulders. That chest. Those arms. He looked like he could tear down trees with his bare hands. Like he had torn down trees with his bare hands. Judging by the scars visible on his forearms where his sleeves were rolled back. His hair was dark, nearly black, long enough to brush his shoulders, with rain still dripping from it despite the fire's warmth. His face was all hard angles and sharp lines, high cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, a nose that had been broken at least once and healed crooked. Not handsome in any conventional sense, but arresting, magnetic. The kind of face that commanded attention and refused to be ignored. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Gold. Pure, brilliant gold, with an inner light that had nothing to do with the fire's reflection. They watched her with an intensity that made her want to look away and hold his gaze simultaneously. Those were not human eyes, could not be human eyes. "What are you?" The question escaped before she could stop it, her voice a harsh rasp that barely qualified as speech. One corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, more an acknowledgement of a fair question. "Concerned about you at the moment. Your body temperature dropped dangerously low. Another few minutes in that river and I wouldn't have reached you in time." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." He rose from the chair with fluid grace that belied his size and moved to a table against the wall. Elara's eyes followed him, tracking his movements with the wariness of prey in the presence of a predator. He poured something from a clay pitcher into a wooden cup and brought it to her bedside. "Drink this. It'll help with the pain and the cold." She stared at the cup suspiciously. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I pulled you from a river instead of leaving you to drown, and I've spent the last several hours keeping you alive instead of finishing what the water started." His tone was matter-of-fact, without heat or offense. "If I wanted to harm you, I've had ample opportunity." Logic she couldn't argue with, though that didn't mean she had to like it. She took the cup with trembling hands and sniffed it cautiously. The liquid was golden brown, steaming slightly, with a complex herbal scent that reminded her of her grandmother's medicines. She took a small sip. It was sweet and bitter at once, warming her from the inside out, easing the pain in her throat almost immediately. She drank deeper. "Good," he said, settling back into his chair. "You'll need your strength. We have much to discuss. I don't even know your name." "Ronan." He said it simply, as if the name itself should mean something. When she showed no recognition, something flickered across his face. Surprise? Relief? "And you are Elara." She nearly dropped the cup. "How do you know that?" "I've been watching your village for some time. I knew your grandmother." The room seemed to tilt. "My grandmother died when I was 12. "No," Ronan corrected quietly. "Your grandmother drowned when she was 27. Before your mother was born, the woman who raised you was your great-aunt, though your family called her grandmother to hide the truth." Elara's mind reeled. That's not possible. She never said anything?" "No, she wouldn't have. It was safer that way. Safer for her. Safer for your mother. Safer for you. But blood doesn't lie, Elara. And your blood has been calling to me for years, growing louder every day. Tonight, when you entered the river, it screamed." She set the cup down on the furs with shaking hands. This was madness. He was mad, or she was mad, or perhaps drowning had damaged her brain and none of this was real. Maybe she was still in the river, her dying mind creating elaborate fantasies to ease the transition to death. "I need to go." She tried to sit up fully and gasped as pain lanced through her ribs. Ronan didn't move to stop her, but his voice carried quiet certainty. "Go where? Back to the village that tried to kill you? To the brother who brought the rope? Or the pastor who carried the stones?" Each word was a knife, precise and true. She slumped back against the furs, the fight draining out of her. "They'll think I'm dead," she whispered. "Good, let them think that. Let them sleep soundly in their beds, believing they've rid themselves of the witch who brought misfortune. Let them forget you ever existed." His golden eyes held hers. "Because the girl they tried to drown is dead. The girl who believed she was human, who thought she was one of them, she died in that river tonight. Then who am I? Someone who finally has the chance to find out." He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the rain that still hammered against the glass. Lightning flashed, illuminating his profile, and for just a moment, so brief she might have imagined it, Elara saw something else overlaid on his human form. Something with fur and fangs and those same golden eyes. Something that walked on 4 legs and howled at the moon. She blinked and it was gone, but the image burned in her mind. "The wolf," she breathed. "In the river, that was you." He turned back to face her, and this time his smile was real, showing teeth that seemed a touch too sharp. "Now you're beginning to understand." "No," she said, her voice rising despite the pain. "No, I don't understand anything. Wolves can't, people can't, it's not possible. It's not possible in the world you knew. But you're not in that world anymore, Elara. You entered the river as a human girl fleeing from death. You emerged into a world much older, much larger, and much stranger than anything your village ever dreamed of." He moved closer, kneeling beside her bed so their eyes were level. "I am Ronan Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Northern Packs. I rule over 17 wolf packs spanning these mountains and the territories beyond. My people are shifters. We walk as humans when we choose, and as wolves when our nature calls. We've existed since the first moon rose over the first forest, and we will exist long after your village has turned to dust." She wanted to call him insane, to laugh at the absurdity of it all, but looking into those gold eyes, seeing the absolute certainty there, feeling the truth of his words resonating in some deep part of herself she'd never acknowledged, she couldn't. "Why save me?" she asked instead. "What am I to you?" "That," he said softly, "is the question that brought me to your village in the first place. 3 months ago, I felt something calling to me, a pull, strong and insistent, emanating from your little human settlement. I followed it and found you, a girl who saw things others didn't, who heard whispers in the wind, who made flowers bloom out of season with just a touch, a girl whose blood sang with power she didn't understand and couldn't control." "I'm not powerful," Elara protested. I was just what? A convenient scapegoat when things went wrong? An easy target for a village that feared anything different?" He shook his head. "You are so much more than that. Your grandmother knew it. Your great-grandmother knew it before she drowned. That's why they killed her, Elara. Not because she was evil, but because she was powerful, because she was becoming something they couldn't control. Becoming what? Ronan was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, measured. There are old bloodlines in this world, powers that predate even my kind. Most have faded, diluted through generations of mixing with ordinary humans. But every few generations, someone is born in whom the blood runs true, someone who carries the full weight of their ancestors' gifts. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. His palm was warm, almost hot, and where his skin touched hers, she felt something. A spark, a resonance, like two notes in perfect harmony. Your bloodline is ancient, Elara. Older than my kind, older than the written word. Your ancestors were called different names in different times. Druids, priestesses, wise women, witches. They could speak to water and wind, could hear the earth's heartbeat, could see the threads that connect all living things. They were bridges between the natural world and something more, something deeper. And you think I'm... She couldn't even finish the sentence. It was too absurd. I don't think. I know. His grip on her hand tightened slightly. I felt your power awaken the moment you entered that river. The water recognized you, Elara. It tried to claim you, yes, but not to kill you, to transform you, to complete what your blood has been trying to do your entire life. She pulled her hand free, her head spinning. This is insane. Magic isn't real. Werewolves aren't real. None of this is real. Then explain how I carried you from a raging river without being swept away myself. Explain how you survived water that should have crushed you against rocks and drowned you in minutes. Explain. He stopped abruptly, his head tilting, his eyes unfocusing in a way that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. What? She whispered. What is it? Someone's coming. He was on his feet in one fluid motion, moving to the window. Several someones, on horseback, following the river downstream. Elara's blood turned to ice. The village. They're looking for my body. Most likely. He studied the darkness beyond the window, his expression grim. We're far enough from the river that they shouldn't find this place, but we can't take chances. Can you walk? I don't know. Then we'll find out. He crossed to her in 2 long strides and pulled back the furs. She was wearing a simple shirt. His shirt, she realized, far too large for her, hanging to mid-thigh. Her dress, she saw, hung drying by the fire, still caked with mud and torn beyond repair. Ronan slipped an arm around her waist and lifted her to her feet with no apparent effort. Her legs trembled but held. Pain radiated from her ribs and 100 other places, but she could stand. She could move. There's a safe room, he said quietly, guiding her across the cabin. Beneath the floor. You'll be hidden there. What about you? I'll deal with any visitors. He moved aside a heavy rug to reveal a trapdoor. When he pulled it open, Elara saw a ladder leading down into darkness. The space below was small but well supplied. She could make out furs, water skins, and what looked like dried food stores. Down, Ronan commanded, and this time there was steel in his voice. Not cruel, but absolutely unyielding. She climbed down the ladder, her muscles screaming in protest. When she reached the bottom, she looked up at Ronan framed in the opening above. What if they find me? They won't. But what if... Elara. He cut her off, and his eyes seemed to glow brighter in the darkness. I did not pull you from that river only to let small-minded humans take you from me. I did not spend years searching for you only to lose you now. Whatever comes through that door, I will handle it. Do you understand? She nodded mutely. Good. Stay quiet. Stay still. No matter what you hear, do not come up until I call for you. He closed the trapdoor, plunging her into absolute darkness. She heard him replace the rug, his footsteps moving away, the scrape of his chair as he settled by the fire. Then silence. Elara sat in the darkness, heart hammering, listening. Minutes passed like hours. Her ribs ached with each breath. Her throat still burned. But none of that mattered as much as the terror coiling in her chest. Not fear for herself, she realized with surprise, but fear for Ronan. The man who'd saved her from the river. The creature who claimed to be a king of wolves. The stranger who looked at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. Who was he really? And more importantly, why did some deep part of her already trust him more than she'd ever trusted anyone in her entire life? The sound of hoofbeats reached her even through the floor. Multiple horses, moving fast. They stopped outside the cabin. Voices called out, muffled but urgent. Elara pressed her hand over her mouth, fighting the urge to cry out. In the darkness of her hiding place, with danger closing in above, she finally allowed herself to fully grasp what had happened tonight. Her old life was gone. The girl named Elara who'd grown up in that village, who'd believed she knew her place in the world, who'd thought she understood the boundaries of reality. That girl had drowned. Someone new was being born in her place. Someone with power in her blood and a wolf king standing guard above her, willing to face down anything to keep her safe. She just had to survive long enough to find out who that someone would become. The voices above grew louder. Elara pressed herself against the earthen wall of the hiding space, her hand still clamped over her mouth, trying to slow her breathing. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. She was trapped in this hole in the ground, dependent on a stranger. A monster, her mind corrected, though the word felt wrong, to protect her. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor above. Multiple people, from the sound of it. She heard the cabin door slam open, hinges groaning. "Nobody here!" a man's voice called out. Not anyone she recognized. A stranger. "Check everything." That voice she knew. Marcus, her brother. The one who'd brought the rope. She might have washed up somewhere nearby. The river curves not far from here. Elara's fingernails dug into her palms. The betrayal was still raw, still bleeding. How many times had Marcus sworn to protect her? How many childhood promises had turned to ash the moment the village decided she was dangerous? "There's a man by the fire." A third voice, younger, nervous. "I can see that." Marcus again. Then louder, clearly addressing Ronan. Have you seen anyone come this way?" A young woman, dark hair wearing a white dress. Silence stretched. Elara could picture Ronan in his chair, regarding the intruders with those unsettling golden eyes. "No." His voice was flat, uninterested. "I've seen no one." "The river's been wild tonight," Marcus pressed. "If someone fell in upstream, they might have washed up near here." "Maybe you heard screaming? Saw someone on the bank?" I said no. The curtness in Ronan's voice made Elara wince. Subtlety clearly wasn't his strong suit. She willed him to play along, to seem more cooperative, anything to make them leave faster. "Awful isolated out here," another villager said. "Long way from town. What's your business in these parts?" "Hunting." "Hunting what?" A pause. Then, with what might have been dark amusement, "Whatever needs hunting." Footsteps moved through the cabin, heavy boots on wooden planks. Elara tracked them above her head, her heart in her throat every time they passed near the trap door. They were searching, looking in corners, moving things. Would they notice the rug looked displaced? Would they think to check beneath it? "This is his property," Marcus said, though he didn't sound happy about it. "We can't just tear the place apart." "She's a murderer," the nervous young voice insisted. The pastor said she was a witch," Marcus interrupted. "That's not the same thing. And even if she was here, which clearly she isn't, the river probably..." He trailed off. Even through the floor, Elara heard the slight catch in his voice. Was that grief, guilt, or just frustration that their search was proving fruitless? "There's a dress by the fire," someone said. Woman's dress, all torn up and muddy. Elara's blood froze. She'd seen her dress hanging there, hadn't thought about what it would look like to searchers. "That?" Ronan's voice carried a note of disdain. "Found it caught on rocks downstream 2 days ago. Kept it in case the owner came looking. You're welcome to take it if you think it's yours." 2 days ago? Marcus sounded skeptical. "Check the mud if you don't believe me. It's dry, caked. Nothing from tonight." Silence. Then footsteps approaching the fire. The sound of fabric rustling as someone examined the dress. "He's right," the nervous voice said. "This mud's bone dry. Been here a while." "Could still be hers," Marcus insisted, but he sounded less certain now. "Could be anyone's. River takes plenty." Ronan's voice hardened. "Now I've answered your questions. I've let you search my home uninvited. You've disturbed my evening and tracked mud across my floor. I think we're done here." The dismissal was clear and absolute. Elara heard someone, probably Marcus, take a breath as if to argue, then let it out in defeat. "If you see her," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, "tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I failed her. Tell her," he paused. "Tell her I hope she finds whatever she's looking for out here." "If I see her," Ronan replied, "I'll tell her nothing from you." Words are cheap. Actions are what matter, and your actions tonight spoke clearly enough. The horse's hoofbeats finally faded into the rain-soaked night. Still, Ronan waited. Elara could hear him moving around the cabin, checking the door, the windows. Only after several more minutes did he pull back the rug and open the trapdoor. "They're gone." His hand appeared in the opening, reaching down to help her. Elara stared at it for a moment, then took it. His grip was warm and steady as he lifted her back into the cabin with ease. The fire had burned lower, casting longer shadows. Her dress still hung by the hearth, exactly as it had been. Ronan's chair sat by the fire, undisturbed. You'd never know 5 armed men had just searched this place. "Thank you," Elara said quietly, "for not telling them. I gave you my word you'd be safe here." He guided her back to the bed, his hand gentle on her elbow. "I don't break my word." She sank onto the furs, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. Hearing Marcus's voice, hearing his pathetic justifications, it had reopened wounds she'd been trying to keep closed. "He said he was trying to protect me," she said hollowly, "by bringing the rope himself. Do you believe him?" "I don't know." She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Maybe he really thought he was being merciful. Maybe he was just a coward looking for an excuse. "Does it matter?" "Only if it matters to you." Elara looked at him. This strange man-creature who'd saved her life, who'd lied to her brother without hesitation, who'd threatened trained hunters with such calm certainty. His golden eyes reflected the firelight, making them seem to glow from within. "Why do you care?" she asked. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why risk yourself for someone you've never even met?" Ronan was quiet for a long moment. He moved to the fire and added another log, watching sparks spiral up the chimney before answering. "Do you know why wolves howl at the moon?" he asked instead. The question was so unexpected that Elara blinked. No, not really. Most humans think it's instinct. Animal noise without meaning. But that's not true. We howl to call to each other across great distances. To say, "I am here, where are you?" To announce ourselves to the world. To claim our place under the sky. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. 3 months ago, I heard an answer to a call I didn't even know I'd sent. A pulse of power so strong it woke me from sleep. It pulled at me, insistent and undeniable, coming from a human village I'd never visited. I tried to ignore it. Tried to convince myself it was nothing. But the pull only grew stronger. "So you came looking." "I came looking. And I found you." He took a step closer. "You were in the village square, drawing water from the well. Just an ordinary morning, an ordinary task. But when you touched the water, it moved. Not from the bucket dropping in. The water itself moved toward your hand, like it recognized you. Like it wanted to touch you." Elara's breath caught. She remembered that morning. She'd thought it was just the wind, or her imagination. "I watched you for weeks," Ronan continued. "Saw you make dead flowers bloom with a touch. Heard you singing in languages you'd never learned. Watched you stand in the rain and the drops would fall around you but never on you, unless you wanted them to. You were unconsciously manipulating the natural world in small ways, constantly, without even realizing it." "That's not possible," she whispered, but the words were automatic now. "Hollow." "It is, and it's growing stronger. Your power has been building your entire life, contained by your ignorance, by the mundane world around you, by your determination to be normal. But it can't be contained forever. Eventually it needs release. Eventually it needs to awaken fully." His eyes held hers. "The river was trying to help you, Elara. The moment you entered the water, I felt your power surge. The river recognized what you are. Water calls to water. Ancient magic calls to ancient magic. It was attempting to complete your transformation. By drowning me, by stripping away everything that was holding you back. Fear, identity, the illusion that you were human like the others." He shook his head. "But you weren't ready. The process was too violent, too sudden. Another minute, and you would have died, or become something neither fully alive nor dead, trapped between states. That's why I intervened. Elara's head was spinning. So what am I now? Half transformed? Stuck between human and whatever I'm supposed to be? Your awakening. It's a process, not an instant change. The river began it, but your body needs time to adjust. Time and, he hesitated, time and proximity to your own kind. I don't have any kind. My family is not them, me. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. I don't understand, Elara said. Ronan moved closer, kneeling beside the bed so they were eye level. There are bonds in this world that transcend logic, connections that exist before two souls ever meet. Your power called to mine, Elara. Across miles of forest, over mountains, through storms. It called to me specifically, not to any shifter, but to me. Why? That's what we need to find out. His hand lifted, hovering near her face, not quite touching. But I can feel it, this pull between us. Can't you? And God's help her, she could. Now that he'd named it, she couldn't ignore it. The strange warmth that spread through her chest when he was near. The way her breathing matched his rhythm. The sense that some part of her she'd never acknowledged had been waiting for him all her life. This is insane, she breathed. Yes, he agreed. It is. I don't even know you. No, you don't. You could be lying about everything. You could be the danger, not the solution. I could be, he acknowledged. Then, with quiet intensity, but I'm not. Elara wanted to argue. Wanted to throw logic and reason and common sense at this entire impossible situation. But she was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being afraid. Tired of pretending she was something she wasn't. And beneath the exhaustion, something else stirred. Something that had been sleeping her whole life, waiting for permission to wake. She felt it now, a current of power moving through her veins, warm and electric. It responded to Ronan's presence, reaching toward him like a plant reaching toward the sun. What happens now? She asked. Now you rest, you heal, and when you're strong enough, we begin your real training. Training for what? For survival, for control, for understanding what you truly are. He finally let his hand fall, breaking the almost contact. There are others like me in these mountains. Pack leaders, powerful shifters who rule their own territories. Not all of them will be happy about you being here. Some will see you as a threat. Some will want to use your power for their own purposes. You need to be able to defend yourself. I can't even walk without pain right now. How am I supposed to defend myself against werewolves? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You won't be fighting them with your fists, Elara. You'll be fighting them with what runs in your blood. And trust me, when you learn to wield your full power, even the strongest alpha will think twice before challenging you. He stood, crossing to a chest in the corner and pulling out more furs. Sleep now. Tomorrow we'll talk more. Tomorrow we'll begin. Ronan? She stopped him before he could move away. That thing you said to Marcus, about the girl who drowned being gone, about me not being that person anymore. She met his eyes. Were you just saying that to make him leave? Or did you mean it? He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Both, he said finally. The Elara who believed she was human, who thought she belonged in that village. She did die tonight. She had to. There's no going back to that life, to that understanding of the world. Everything you thought you knew was wrong. That's terrifying. Yes, he agreed. But it's also freedom. You spent your whole life trying to fit into a box that was too small for you, trying to be less than what you were, so others would feel comfortable. That's over now. You can finally become everything you were meant to be. And if I don't like what I'm meant to be, then you'll fight it, and you'll lose, because you can't fight your own nature forever. He settled into his chair by the fire, making it clear the conversation was ending. Or you'll accept it, embrace it, and discover that what you feared was actually the key to everything you've ever wanted. Those are your only real options. Elara lay back in the furs, pulling them around her like armor. Her body ached. Her mind reeled. Her heart was a confused mess of grief and fear and something else she couldn't quite name. Outside, the storm was finally breaking. The rain lessened to a steady patter, the thunder rolling away into the distance. Through a gap in the shutters, she could see the first faint lightning of the eastern sky. Dawn was coming. She closed her eyes, but sleep was elusive. Every time she started to drift off, she saw the river closing over her head, felt the water filling her lungs, experienced again that terrible moment of surrender, and then those golden eyes cutting through the darkness. That impossible rescue, being pulled from death into this, whatever this was. "Ronan," she whispered, when you were watching me in the village, for those weeks, did you ever think about just taking me? About not waiting for things to get bad?" Silence. Then, "Every day. Why didn't you?" "Because you needed to make the choice. You needed to see what your old world really thought of you. Needed to understand that you didn't belong there. If I'd taken you by force, you would have spent the rest of your life wondering if I was the monster. If you should have stayed." He shifted in his chair. "This way. Whatever happens next, you know the truth. You know they betrayed you. You know they would have killed you. And you know I'm the one who saved you." It was manipulative, strategic, the action of someone who thought several moves ahead. She should be disturbed by that calculation. Instead, she found it oddly comforting. At least he was honest about his motives. At least he wasn't pretending this was all altruism and noble rescue. "I'm going to have nightmares," she said quietly. "About drowning, probably," he agreed. "For a while. But eventually they'll fade, and one day you'll be able to enter water without fear. One day you'll command it instead of it commanding you. I promise you that. How can you promise something like that? Because I've seen others like you master their gifts. Because I've trained dozens of young shifters to control their transformations. Because I've been alive for 173 years, Elara, and I've learned a thing or two about the process of becoming more than human." Her eyes snapped open. "You're what?" "Old, very old. We age differently than humans. Slower, harder to kill. I was born during the time your people still used muskets and thought the mountains were full of demons." He chuckled softly. "They were right about the demons, though we prefer the term territorial predators. 173 years. The number boggled her mind. He looked maybe 35, perhaps 40 at most. The scars, the weathered face. She'd assumed he'd lived hard, not that he'd lived. Multiple human lifetimes. "How many people have you trained?" she asked. "People like me? Like you? None. You're unique. There hasn't been a water-blessed one awakening in this region for over a century. But others with gifts? Dozens, maybe hundreds. I've been Alpha King for 90 years. Training the young, teaching control, helping people like you understand their nature. It's part of my duty. And what happens if I can't learn? If I'm not strong enough?" He turned to look at her, his eyes glowing softly in the dying firelight. "Then I'll protect you anyway. Strength isn't everything, Elara. Sometimes surviving is enough." It wasn't a grand declaration, wasn't a romantic promise. It was simple and honest and absolutely certain. And somehow that made it more reassuring than any flowery words could have been. She closed her eyes again, and this time sleep came more easily. Her last conscious thought was of those golden eyes watching over her. A guardian against the darkness. A wolf king who'd pulled her from the river and refused to let her drown. When the nightmares came, and they did come, vivid and suffocating, she would wake gasping to find Ronan still there, still watching. His presence an anchor keeping her tethered to the waking world. By the time true dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Elara had slept fitfully, but survived the night. Her old life was ashes. Her new life was uncertain and terrifying, but she was alive. Against all odds, she was alive. And something deep in her chest, something that might have been her awakening power, or might have been something more primal and human, whispered that being alive here with him was better than any life she could have lived in that village. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like truth. 3 days passed. 3 days of sleeping and waking, of forcing down soups and teas that tasted of earth and herbs, of lying in the furs while her body slowly remembered how to function without pain. The bruises faded from purple to green to yellow. The ache in her ribs diminished. The rawness in her throat healed. But something else was happening, something that had nothing to do with physical recovery. Elara began to notice things. The cabin wasn't just shelter. It was alive with subtle energies she'd never perceived before. She could feel the age of the wood, the countless years the trees had stood before being shaped into walls and beams. When rain fell on the roof, she knew exactly where each drop would land, could sense their paths through the air as clearly as if she were tracking them with her eyes. And the fire. Gods, the fire! It should have been ordinary. Wood burning, smoke rising, heat radiating. But now she felt the water in the logs being released as steam, felt the transformation from one state to another. She could sense moisture in the air, in the walls, in Ronan's breath when he spoke. The world had become a map of water in all its forms, and she could read it instinctively. "It's getting stronger," she said on the morning of the 4th day. She was sitting up for the first time, her back against the wall, watching Ronan prepare breakfast. "The awareness, whatever it is. Your gift," he said simply, cracking eggs into a pan. "It's no longer suppressed. The river awakened it, and now it's growing to fill its natural capacity." He glanced at her. "How does it feel?" "Overwhelming. Like I'm hearing 100 conversations at once. Except they're not in words. They're in," she struggled for language, "in sensations. In knowing. That will settle. Right now, everything is new, and your mind is trying to process it all at once. In time, you'll learn to filter, to focus on what's relevant, and let the rest become background noise." He brought her a plate, eggs, bread, some kind of dried meat. Real food, not just broth. Her stomach growled appreciatively. "Eat," he commanded. "You need your strength back. We start training today." "Training?" She took the plate, surprised. "I can barely walk to the door without getting winded." "Then we'll train sitting down. The body will catch up. Right now, we need to focus on your mind, on teaching you control before your power decides to manifest on its own." "What happens if it does?" "Manifest on its own, I mean." Ronan settled into his chair with his own plate. "At best, nothing dangerous. Water might start moving strangely around you. Rain might fall everywhere except where you're standing. Pipes might burst when you get emotional. At worst," his expression darkened, "you could accidentally drown someone. Flood the cabin. Pull every drop of water out of a living body, killing them instantly." Elara's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "I could do that? Kill someone? You could do much worse than that if you had no control. Water is life, Elara. It's in everything, everyone. A gift like yours, wielded by someone who doesn't understand it, is a weapon waiting for a target." He took a bite of bread. "That's why we train. So you become the master of your power, not its victim." She set down her fork, appetite vanishing. "Maybe I don't want this power. Maybe I'd rather just be normal." Too late for that. No sympathy in his voice, just fact. "The river chose you. Your bloodline chose you. You can learn to control it, or you can let it control you, but you cannot unmake what you are." You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. The hard part is accepting what you can't change so you can focus on what you can. Elara picked at her food, frustrated but unable to argue his logic. "Fine. So how do we start this training?" "We start with breath." She blinked. "Breath?" "Everything begins with breath. It's the bridge between conscious and unconscious, between body and spirit. It's also water, the moisture in your lungs, the vapor you exhale. Learn to feel your own breath, and you've taken the first step toward feeling all water." He set aside his plate and turned his chair to face her fully. "Close your eyes. Really? That's the training? Closing my eyes? Do you want to learn or do you want to argue?" She closed her eyes. "Good, now breathe. Just normal breathing, nothing special. And as you breathe, try to feel it. Not just the air moving in and out, but the moisture in that air. The water vapor in your lungs. The humidity in the cabin. Don't try to do anything with it. Just feel it." It sounded absurd, but Elara tried, focusing on her breath, on the sensation of air filling her lungs. At first, there was nothing unusual, just breathing, like she'd done every day of her life. Then slowly she began to perceive something else. A faint awareness of dampness, of tiny water droplets suspended in the air she inhaled. It was subtle, barely there, but once she noticed it, she couldn't unnotice it. "I feel something," she whispered. "It's faint, but don't talk. Just feel. Follow that awareness. See how far it extends?" She did, and as she focused, the awareness grew. She could feel the moisture in her breath, yes, but also in the air around her. In the firs beneath her, in the wooden walls. It was like she'd been given a new sense, one that had been blind her entire life, and was only now learning to see. "There's water everywhere," she breathed. "In everything. How did I never notice? Because you were blind to it. Now you're waking up. Keep going. Follow the water. Feel where it leads." The awareness expanded. She felt the rainwater still beating on the cabin roof from last night's shower. Felt the moisture in the earth beneath the foundation. Felt the stream running perhaps 100 yards away, its current cool and swift. And beyond that, farther away but still somehow within her perception, the river that had tried to claim her. The moment she thought of it, her awareness snapped to it like a bowstring releasing. Suddenly, she wasn't just feeling the water. She was in it, of it, experiencing the river's flow with an intimacy that stole her breath. She felt every rock in its bed, every eddy and rapid, every fish that swam through its depths. The river was alive, and it knew her, and it was calling. "Elara!" Ronan's voice cut through her awareness like a knife. "Pull back!" Flying open. She was standing. When had she stood? And her hands were outstretched, fingers splayed. Water drops hung in the air around her, suspended impossibly, defying gravity. They came from everywhere. From the air, from the walls, from Ronan's pan of wash water, slowly gathering and hovering around her like orbiting moons. "Pull back," Ronan repeated, calmer now but still urgent. "Feel them. Now let them go. Gently." Elara stared at the water drops, mesmerized and terrified. She could feel each one, connected to her will by invisible threads. One thought and she could gather more. One impulse and she could freeze them, or heat them, or send them crashing against the walls like tiny missiles. The power was intoxicating and terrifying. "Elara." Ronan was standing now too, hands raised but not touching her. "Let them go. You're safe. You're in control. Just release them." She didn't know how. The power had come instinctively, but sending it away required intention she didn't possess. The drops continued to gather, pulling moisture from every surface, the air growing noticeably drier. "I don't know how," she whispered. "Yes, you do. It's the same as picking something up and putting it down. You reached out and took them. Now you set them back." "I didn't reach out. It just happened." "Then let it just unhappen. Stop holding on. Stop holding on." Simple words. Impossible action. The water wanted to stay connected to her. It didn't want to return to being ordinary, unguided. It had found purpose, direction, and releasing that felt like losing a part of herself. "Elara," Ronan's voice dropped lower, became almost a growl. "You're taking water from my body now, from my lungs. Let go." The shock of that broke through her paralysis. She looked at him and saw the strain in his face, saw him struggling to breathe. She was killing him. Accidentally, unconsciously, but killing him nonetheless. Terror gave her the push she needed. She imagined her grip on the water loosening, imagined it returning to where it belonged. The drops wavered, then fell, pattering onto the floor and her clothing like a brief indoor rain. The air immediately felt more humid, easier to breathe. Ronan drew a long, shuddering breath. "Well," he said after a moment, "that was educational." Elara collapsed back onto the furs, shaking. "I almost killed you. You didn't, though. You stopped." He retrieved a cloth and began wiping up the water puddles. "That's the important part. I didn't mean to. I just thought about the river and suddenly you connected to it, and through it, to all the water in your vicinity. Yes. That's what uncontrolled power does. It responds to emotion, to stray thoughts, to unconscious desires." He finished cleaning and sat back in his chair, studying her. "This is why we train, Elara. So that doesn't happen when you're angry, or frightened, or grieving." She wrapped her arms around herself, still trembling. "Maybe we should stop. Maybe I'm not ready for this." "You're not. But we don't have the luxury of waiting until you are. Your power is awake now. It's going to keep growing, keep testing its boundaries. We need to establish control before it becomes truly dangerous. It's already truly dangerous. I almost suffocated you." "Almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, as the humans say." He leaned forward, his golden eyes intent. "Listen to me. What just happened was frightening, yes. But it was also progress. You felt your power. You manifested it. And most importantly, you found the will to stop it. That's more than most manage on their first attempt. Elara's voice pitched higher. You mean we're doing that again? Eventually, yes. Not today. You need to recover. But soon. And again after that. And again. Until controlling your gift becomes as natural as breathing. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the forest. The packs know you're here by now, Elara. They can feel the power shift in these mountains. They know something new has awakened, and some of them will come to investigate. When? Days, maybe a week. Depends how bold they're feeling and how curious. He glanced back at her. I can protect you from physical threats. I'm the Alpha King. Most won't dare challenge me directly. But I can't protect you from political maneuvering, from tests and challenges disguised as courtesy visits. For that, you need to be strong enough to defend yourself. I don't want to fight other werewolves. Shifters, he corrected. We prefer shifters. And you won't have to fight them. Not physically. But you will need to show them you're not helpless. That you're under my protection because you're worth protecting, not because you're weak. The distinction seemed important to him, though Elara couldn't quite grasp why. And if I can't, if I'm not strong enough, then they'll view you as a liability, something that might endanger the packs, and they'll push for your removal, either from my territory or... He didn't finish, but he didn't need to, or from life entirely. Yes, she laughed bitterly. So I escaped one group trying to kill me, only to worry about another group trying to kill me. Fantastic. The difference is, this time you'll have the power to stop them. He returned to his chair, his expression serious. I know this is overwhelming. I know you're afraid. But you're stronger than you realize, Elara. What you did just now, pulling water from multiple sources simultaneously, holding it in defiance of gravity, maintaining the connection even when frightened, that takes real power. Raw, yes. Uncontrolled, absolutely. But power nonetheless. It doesn't feel like power. It feels like drowning on dry land. All power feels that way at first. Like too much, like drowning, like you'll be consumed by it. His voice softened. But you won't be. I'll make sure of that. The certainty in his voice was almost enough to make her believe him. Almost. She looked at her hands, still trembling slightly. These hands that had pulled water from the air, that had nearly suffocated an Alpha King without meaning to. What else might they do? What other disasters might they cause? Tell me about the others, she said, trying to focus on something concrete. The shifters who might come. What should I expect? Ronan considered this. There are 17 packs in the Northern Territories. Most are loyal. I've ruled long enough to earn their respect, and they understand the value of having a strong Alpha King. But there are always ambitious ones. Young alphas who think they could do better, old ones who resent change. And they'll see me as change. They'll see you as an unknown variable, a human with power awakening in their territory. Some will be curious, some will be concerned. A few will see opportunity, either to ally with you or eliminate a potential threat before you become too strong. How do I know which is which? You don't, not at first. That's why I'll be with you for every meeting, and why you need to appear strong even when you're terrified. He smiled slightly, especially when you're terrified. Fear is honest, but showing it in shifter politics is blood in the water. So I need to control my power and lie convincingly about my emotional state. Anything else? Don't challenge anyone to combat. Don't accept any food or drink you haven't seen prepared. Don't make promises you can't keep. And don't, under any circumstances, let anyone separate you from me during these meetings. The last point carried particular weight. Why? What would they do? Test you, push your boundaries, see if you're truly under my protection or if I'm bluffing. His eyes hardened. And some might try to claim you for themselves. A water witch, even an untrained one, is a valuable asset. Some alphas would kill to have that kind of power in their pack. Elara's stomach churned. So I'm going from being a scapegoat to being a commodity. Great. You're neither. The steel in Ronan's voice made her look up. You're not a thing to be used or traded. You're a person awakening to your true nature. Anyone who treats you as less than that will answer to me. The fierceness of his protection should have felt oppressive, like ownership. Instead, it felt like safety. Like for the first time in her life, someone was choosing to stand between her and the world's cruelty, not out of duty or obligation, but because they genuinely wanted to. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded once, accepting the gratitude without deflecting or minimizing it. Another thing she appreciated about him: he didn't do false modesty. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Birds called in the forest, normal birds, ordinary nature sounds. It was almost possible to pretend this was a normal day, a normal morning, a normal life. Almost. Elara closed her eyes again, but this time she wasn't meditating. She was remembering. The river, the drowning, the moment of surrender, and then those golden eyes cutting through the darkness, impossible and real, pulling her from death into this strange new existence. She'd died in that river, or part of her had. The part that believed in simple truths and safe boundaries. The part that thought she knew what the world was made of. Whatever was being born in that dead girl's place, she didn't know yet. Didn't know if she'd like her. Didn't know if she'd be strong enough to survive in this new reality where werewolves were real and water answered to her unconscious thoughts. But she was alive to find out. And that at least was something. "Ronan?" she said without opening her eyes. "Yes?" "When this is over, when I've learned control, when the other packs have accepted me or whatever needs to happen, what then? What do I do with the rest of my life?" Silence stretched. "Then, anything you want. You'll be free in ways you never were before. Powerful. Protected. The world will be yours to explore. And will you—" She trailed off, not sure how to finish that question. "Will I what? Will you still be there? Or is this just temporary? Obligation fulfilled, debt repaid, time to move on?" More silence. Longer this time. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "I don't know. This bond between us, this pull that brought me to you, I don't fully understand it yet. It could fade once your power is fully awakened. It could strengthen. It could transform into something neither of us expects. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I have." She heard him shift in his chair. "Ask me again in a month. Once you've met the packs. Once you've seen more of this world. Once you know what you're choosing, not just what you're running from. Then I'll give you a real answer." It was fair. Frustrating, but fair. She couldn't expect promises from someone she'd known less than a week, regardless of how intense those days had been. But some part of her, the part that had felt the rightness of his presence, the bone-deep recognition when he'd pulled her from the river, wanted those promises anyway. Wanted to hear that he'd stay, that this protection and training and strange partnership would last. Wanted to believe that being saved meant being kept. Foolish, probably. Dangerous, certainly. But then again, she'd died in a river and been reborn in a werewolf's arms. Foolish and dangerous seemed to be her new normal. "All right," she said, opening her eyes. "A month. Then I ask again, and you answer honestly. Deal." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the morning stretching toward noon. Outside, the forest continued its ancient rhythms, unconcerned with human drama or shifter politics or water witches learning to control power that could drown the world. Elara felt that power now, humming just beneath her skin, waiting, growing, learning the shape of its vessel and preparing to fill it completely. She'd almost killed Ronan this morning. Tomorrow, or the next day, she'd probably almost kill him again while learning control. But she'd also stopped. When it mattered, when his life was on the line, she'd found the will to pull back. That had to count for something. She just hoped it would count for enough when the other packs came calling, when her control was tested not by friendly training but by hostile examination, when showing weakness could mean death, and showing too much strength could mean the same. The tightrope stretched ahead of her, invisible and deadly. All she could do was learn to walk it without falling, and trust that if she did fall, there would be golden eyes waiting beneath the darkness, ready to pull her out once more. The first pack arrived 6 days after Elara's awakening. She was outside the cabin when she felt them coming, a pressure against her awareness, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Ronan had her practicing a meditation technique, sitting by the stream that ran behind the cabin, learning to feel the water's flow without trying to control it. Just observe, he'd instructed that morning. Don't pull, don't push. Let the water show you what it's doing naturally. Learn its rhythms. It was harder than it sounded. Every time she connected to the water, it wanted to respond to her, wanted to rise up, to swirl, to perform for her attention. Convincing it to simply be itself while she watched was like trying to have a conversation with someone who kept trying to give you gifts you hadn't asked for. But she was getting better. The panic attacks had decreased. She could now touch water without immediately trying to dominate it. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Then the pressure came. Different from the water's signature. Heavier and more complex. It felt like a tension. Like multiple someones had turned their focus toward this place. Toward her. With the intensity of searchlights finding their target. She opened her eyes and looked at Ronan, who stood a few yards away, his posture suddenly tense. "They're here," he said quietly. "How many?" "5, maybe 6. From the Western Pack, Blackridge territory." His eyes had taken on that distant quality they got when he was using senses she didn't possess. "Their alpha is young, ambitious. This should be interesting." "Should I be worried?" "Should you be cautious?" "Yes, worried? Not yet." He extended his hand to help her up. "Remember what we discussed. Show strength, but not aggression. Answer questions simply. Don't volunteer information they don't ask for. And stay close to me." Elara took his hand and rose, brushing leaves from her borrowed clothing. A simple tunic and leggings that Ronan had provided from stores she suspected he kept for exactly these situations. Her dress had been beyond repair, and somehow she didn't mourn it. That white cotton had belonged to the old Elara. This new one needed different armor. They walked back toward the cabin together, and as they emerged from the tree line, she saw them. 6 figures stood in the clearing before the cabin, and calling them people felt inadequate. They had human shapes, 2 women and 4 men, all dressed in practical clothing suited for wilderness travel. But there was something fundamentally other about them, the way they held themselves, the way they moved, the way their eyes tracked every motion with predatory precision. The one at the front was clearly the alpha. He was tall, not quite Ronan's height, but close, with auburn hair pulled back in a tail and eyes the color of amber. Younger than Ronan appeared, perhaps late 20s, with the kind of build that suggested he'd earned his position through combat rather than inheritance. Multiple scars marked his exposed forearms, and his stance radiated confidence bordering on arrogance. "Ronan Blackthorn," the alpha called out, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. "It's been a while since you've graced our territory with your presence." "To what do we owe the honor?" "Cassius Blackridge." Ronan's tone was neutral, giving nothing away. "This is my territory, not yours. The boundary lies 3 miles west of here. You know that. Boundaries can be fluid, especially when interesting things happen near them." Cassius's amber eyes slid to Elara, and she felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. "Is this the source of the disturbance we've all been feeling? The power that woke me from sleep 6 nights ago? This is Elara," Ronan said, not confirming or denying. "She's under my protection." "Elara." Cassius took a step forward, and immediately Ronan moved to intercept, placing himself between the alpha and Elara. Cassius smiled at that, showing teeth. "Protective, how unlike you. The Alpha King who usually prefers distance and delegation suddenly keeping a human close? That alone tells me she's more than she appears. What she is or isn't is none of your concern." "Oh, but it is. When power like that awakens in our territory—" "My territory," Ronan corrected, steel entering his voice. "It affects all of us. The balance shifts. The old agreements need to be reassessed." Cassius's smile widened. "I'm sure you understand, King. We're not here to challenge you. We're here for information." "Surely that's reasonable." The title King was said with just enough irony to be insulting without being overtly disrespectful. Elara recognized the tactic. Push boundaries, test limits, see what you could get away with. "Information about what?" Ronan asked. "About her. What she is, where she came from, what her presence means for the packs." Cassius tried to peer around Ronan at Elara. "She doesn't smell entirely human. There's something else there. Something old. Something that tastes like rain and river stones and drowned things." Despite herself, Elara shivered. The description was too accurate, too intimate. "She's awakening to her gifts," Ronan said. "That's all you need to know." "Awakening to what, specifically?" "That power surge 6 nights ago, that was water magic. Pure strong water magic. I haven't felt anything like it since. He paused, his expression shifting to something like wonder. Since the last Druid died 70 years ago. Is that what she is? A Druid returned? The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. The other shifters shifted restlessly, their attention sharpening. Druid? One of the women asked, her voice carrying notes of awe and fear. That's not possible. The bloodlines died out generations ago. Apparently not all of them, Cassius said, still watching Elara with those unsettling amber eyes. This is significant, Ronan. More than just pack politics. If she's truly Druid-blessed, the old agreements apply. The treaties our ancestors made with her kind. She doesn't belong to you. She belongs to all of us. To the wild places themselves. She belongs to no one but herself, Ronan growled. And for the first time, Elara heard something primal in his voice. Not quite human. The wolf underneath, making itself known. Of course. Poor choice of words. Cassius raised his hands placatingly, but his eyes gleamed with satisfaction at having provoked a reaction. But you must admit this changes things. A Druid in our territories. That's bigger than pack boundaries. Bigger than any one alpha's claim. This is a matter for the council. No. Ronan's response was immediate and absolute. You can't refuse a council summons. Not for something this important. Watch me. The tension in the clearing ratcheted up several notches. The shifters behind Cassius spread out slightly. Not quite a threatening formation, but close. Elara felt the hair on the back of her neck rise. She also felt the stream behind the cabin responding to her anxiety, its flow becoming agitated, water levels rising slightly. She forced herself to breathe, to calm, to not let her emotions bleed into her power. Showing loss of control now would be disastrous. Ronan, Cassius said, his voice dropping to something more serious. Be reasonable. I understand you want to protect her, that's admirable. But hiding her away won't work. Every pack within 100 miles felt that awakening. They're all talking about it. Some are concerned. Some are excited. And some, he let that hang meaningfully, some are afraid. You know how this works. Fear breeds preemptive action. If you don't bring her before the council voluntarily, someone will force the issue. Let them try. You'd go to war? Over one untrained Druid? She's not even pack, Ronan. She's not sworn to you. Not bloodbound. What claim do you actually have on her? It was a fair question. Elara realized she didn't actually know the answer. Ronan had saved her, was training her, protected her. But what was their actual relationship? What gave him the right to speak for her? She's under my protection, Ronan repeated. That's claim enough, is it? Cassius looked directly at Elara for the first time, his amber eyes intense. What about you, Druid? Do you choose this protection? Or has the Alpha King simply decided for you? Elara felt all eyes turn to her. This was a test, she realized. Not just of her power, but of her will. If she deferred to Ronan, she'd appear weak, controlled. If she challenged him, she'd create division that Cassius could exploit. She thought about what Ronan had taught her over the past days. Show strength. Don't volunteer information. Answer simply. I choose to be here, she said, keeping her voice steady. Ronan saved my life. He's training me. I trust him. That's all that matters, is it? Cassius took another step forward. Because from where I stand, you look like a frightened girl who's being told what to think by a very powerful man. That's not choice. That's coercion. You don't know anything about me. I know you're powerful. I know you're untrained. I know you're in a vulnerable position with no pack, no family, no support system beyond one alpha who has his own agenda. His voice softened, became almost kind. I also know what it's like to be new to this world. To be overwhelmed and afraid and not know who to trust. The council could help you, Elara. Multiple alphas, multiple perspectives. Not just one voice telling you what's right. It was a smooth pitch, almost convincing. But Elara had spent her whole life learning to read people. To sense when someone wanted something from her versus wanting something for her. The council wants to study me, she said flatly. To determine if I'm useful or dangerous. To decide my fate like I'm a problem to be solved rather than a person. Thank you. But I'll take my chances with the one alpha who treats me like I have a say in my own life. Cassius's expression flickered. Surprise, then respect, then calculation. Smart, he said. Smarter than most newly awakened. Very well. I can't force you to attend the council. Not yet. But know this. Your presence here is causing ripples. Those ripples will eventually become waves. You can't hide forever. I'm not hiding. I'm learning. Learning what? To be his weapon? His asset? Druids were never meant to serve alphas, girl. Your ancestors walked between the worlds as equals, answerable only to the wild magic itself. By binding yourself to him, you're betraying that legacy. By binding herself to me, Ronan cut in, his voice dangerous. She's ensuring she lives long enough to understand what that legacy means. You're not concerned about her freedom, Cassius. You're concerned that I got to her first. That I'll have the support of a druid while you're still trying to consolidate your own pack's loyalty. Direct hit. Cassius's expression darkened. You overstep, King. Do I? Or am I simply stating what everyone here already knows? You've been alpha for what, 3 years? And already you've had 2 serious challenges from within your own pack. You're looking for external support to shore up your position. Well, look elsewhere. Elara isn't a game piece for your political ambitions. The clearing went very quiet. The other shifters were practically vibrating with tension, hands twitching toward weapons Elara couldn't see but assumed they carried. Cassius stared at Ronan for a long moment. Then surprisingly, he laughed. You always were good at reading people, old wolf. Fine, you're right. I'm ambitious. I'm building something in Blackridge, and yes, having a druid's support would help immensely. He turned back to Elara. But I'm also right about one thing. You can't stay hidden. Sooner or later, you'll need to declare yourself. Need to show the packs what you are and where you stand. When that time comes, remember that there are options beyond the Alpha King's shadow. He gestured to his pack, and they began to withdraw. But before they left, the clearing. Cassius paused and looked back. One more thing, Ronan, there's talk. Rumors coming from the south. Some of the older packs, the ones who remember the druids from before, they're saying this awakening is unnatural. That no true druid would emerge from a human village without proper lineage, without the old rituals. They're saying she might be something else. Something dangerous, pretending to be something sacred. That's ridiculous, Ronan said. But Elara heard a note of uncertainty in his voice. Maybe, or maybe they're right to be concerned. After all, you haven't actually tested her bloodline, have you? Haven't confirmed what she is beyond the water magic. For all you know, she could be something else entirely. Something that just happens to look like a druid awakening. With that parting shot, Cassius and his pack melted into the forest, moving with the fluid grace of their kind. Within moments, they were gone as if they'd never been. Elara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking. That went well, she said weakly. That went about as expected, Ronan corrected. He was still tense, still watching the forest where the Blackridge pack had disappeared. He pushed to see how far he could go. I pushed back, and now he knows the boundaries. It's how these things work. He said I might be something dangerous, something else. She looked at Ronan. What did he mean? Ronan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. There are legends, old stories about creatures that can mimic sacred powers, parasites that latch onto ancient bloodlines and corrupt them from within. They're called voidlings, beings that exist between life and death, that feed on magic and twist it into something wrong. And you think I might be one of these voidlings? No, he said it firmly. I've seen voidlings. What you have is different. Pure. There's no taint in your magic, Elara. But... He hesitated. But Cassius is right that I haven't formally tested your bloodline. I've been training you based on what I feel and observe. But there are rituals, proper ways to confirm druid heritage. If we performed those and you passed, it would silence the doubters. And if I don't pass, then we'll deal with that when it happens. But I don't think that's a concern. He didn't sound entirely convinced, and Elara realized with a cold clarity that he'd been operating on faith as much as knowledge. He'd saved her because her power called to him, because she seemed to be what he expected. But he didn't actually know for certain. How do we perform these tests? She asked. There's a place, a sacred grove about a day's travel from here. It's neutral ground, protected by old magic. No pack can claim it. No alpha can enter without permission. The druids used it for their rituals. If any place would recognize true druid blood, it would be there. And if I'm not what you think I am, if I'm something else or nothing special at all, Ronan turned to face her fully, his golden eyes serious. Then you're still under my protection. Testing your bloodline doesn't change that. but it would be good to know for certain. For your sake as much as mine. Elara nodded slowly. The encounter with Cassius had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Not because of the threat, though that was real enough, but because of the doubts he'd planted. What if Ronan was wrong? What if she wasn't a druid at all, but something else? Something dangerous? When do we go? She asked. Soon. A few more days of training first. I want you to have better control before we travel. The journey isn't easy, and I can't guarantee we won't encounter other packs along the way. They stood together in the clearing, the afternoon sun filtering through the trees, birds singing their oblivious songs. It should have been peaceful. Instead, Elara felt like she was standing on a precipice, looking down into depths she couldn't measure. Ronan? She said quietly. What Cassius said about druids not serving alphas. About me betraying my legacy by staying with you. Was he right? He was partly right. Ronan's honesty caught her off guard. Druids were independent. They walked their own path, allied with packs when it suited them, but never bound to any one alpha. What we have, this arrangement, it is unusual, probably unprecedented in recent history. Then why are you doing it? Why not just train me and let me go? He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something in his expression she couldn't quite name. Conflict? Longing? Fear? Because that pull I felt, he said finally. That call that brought me to you. It's still there. Stronger every day. And I don't know what it means, but I know it means something. Something important. He paused. Ask me again in a month, remember? Once we know what you are for certain. Once the political dust settles, then I'll give you a real answer. That's still not an answer. I know. He smiled slightly. But it's honest. They went back into the cabin together, and Elara tried to settle back into the routine of training and meditation. But her mind kept circling back to Cassius's words, to the doubts and warnings, to the suggestion that she might be something other than what she appeared. That night she had the dreams again. She was in the river, drowning, water filling her lungs. But this time, when those golden eyes appeared to save her, they weren't Ronan's eyes. They were something else, something ancient and cold and hungry. And when the creature pulled her from the water, she saw her reflection in its gaze and didn't recognize the face looking back. She woke gasping, her power flaring instinctively. Every drop of water in the cabin rose into the air, from the wash basin, from the drying laundry, from the very air itself. They hung suspended, orbiting her like moons around a planet, responding to her terror. Elara. Ronan was there instantly, kneeling by her bed. You're safe. It was just a dream. Let the water go. What if they're right? She whispered, staring at the floating water drops. What if I'm not what you think? What if I'm something wrong? Then we'll figure it out together. But you're not wrong, Elara. Different, yes. Powerful, absolutely. But not wrong. Never wrong. She wanted to believe him. She tried to believe him. But as she slowly lowered the water back to where it belonged, as Ronan kept watch over her like a guardian against the darkness, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something that would test not just her power, but her very identity. Something that would answer all the questions Cassius had raised. And she wasn't sure she was ready for those answers. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Storm clouds gathered over the mountains, pregnant with rain. And somewhere in that storm, Elara thought she heard something calling to her, not with words, but with a feeling, a recognition. The river remembered her. And soon, very soon, it would call her back, not to drown her this time, to claim her. They reached the grove at the blue edge of afternoon, when the world holds its breath between day and night. No stones marked the place. No altar declared it sacred. Only a circle of ancient trees bowed their crowns toward one another, their branches woven into a living dome. Moss muffled every footfall. Light fell in soft green shards. At the center, a spring rose from the earth so clear Elara could count the pale pebbles stitched into its bed. The moment she stepped across the threshold, the hum inside her body became a chorus. She felt the moisture clinging to bark, the breath of the soil, the sigh of the pool. Water in all its forms recognized her and leaned closer, the way a crowd leans toward a name they have not heard in generations. Ronan stopped at her side. It knows you, he murmured. That's a good sign. Good, she said, though her mouth had gone dry. and also terrifying. He angled a wry glance at her. Both can be true. He gestured to the spring. The grove keeps the old ways. Put your hands in the source and let it read you. Don't force anything. Don't resist. And if I am not what we think I am, then we'll know the truth, he said simply. And the truth is better than a rumor with teeth. Elara sank to her knees. The water looked ordinary from here, just light held together. She touched it. Cold shot through her palms and raced up her arms, not cruel, not kind, precise. The spring moved around her fingers as if 1,000 invisible eyes were opening. Something slid inward, not flooding her lungs, not drowning her, but sifting through the rooms of her life with patient hands. Memory after memory brightened. A girl catching rain on her tongue. A teenager making winter violets bloom because grief needed a place to sit. A young woman holding her breath while a river closed over her head. The vision widened. She saw a line of women standing behind her, each a doorway the next one walked through. One called lightning with a whispered song. Another drew fever from a child and poured it into a basin. Another, young, wild-eyed, walked into a river not to die but to be changed. And further back, where memory thinned into myth, a girl who wasn't quite human yet stood under, a sky that had never known a city and taught water the first word for mercy. A warmth like a hand on the back of her neck nudged Elara. Forward, remember, and the spring released. Her, she rocked, lightheaded. Ronan's arm was there before she fell. Easy. The pool glowed, not lantern bright, but with the steady sheen of moonlight caught in a bowl. Symbols unfurled across the surface in lines of pale fire. Elara didn't know the language, and yet she understood it the way a body understands breath. True blood, true line, true air. Ronan exhaled like a man who had been keeping an entire mountain on his shoulders. By the old oaths, he said, almost reverent. You're not just Druid-born, Elara. You're from the founding line. When she only stared at him, he added, there hasn't been one in 2 centuries. Her first impulse was not pride. It was protest. I don't want to be a legend. I want to stop almost killing people when I breathe too hard. His mouth crooked. Legends rarely get what they want, but they do get a say in how the story ends. He nodded at the spring. Finish the rite. What do I say? Your name, your intention, ask its blessing. Mean it. Elara set her hands on the water again. It was warmer now, or she was. My name is Elara, she said. I was supposed to die and didn't. I don't know all the words for what I'm becoming. I want to keep life where I can. I want to be more use than harm. Please, help me remember that when power feels louder than sense. The water answered without a word. A pulse moved through her, gentle as a tide, firm as a vow. Something braided itself between her and the spring, a thread running outward to every stream and cloud the source would one day feed. Not ownership, kinship, not command. Consent. When she lifted her hands, her skin was dry. It's done, Ronan said, satisfaction deepening his voice. Any alpha who argues now argues with the grove itself. Even the proud ones won't risk that. Cassius might, she said, thinking of the amber-eyed alpha who had come sniffing after rumors and politics. He wears risk like a crown. Ronan's expression warned that she wasn't wrong, but he didn't have time to answer. The air changed. No wind stirred. Yet the leaves rustled as if a thought had moved through them. The light dimmed. No cloud crossed the sun, not exactly, but the grove felt as if a door had opened on the far side of the world, and something old had glanced in. Elara, Ronan said softly, every line of his body alert. Behind me. Not a threat, Elara whispered, surprising herself. She could feel it the way she felt the presence of the river before she saw it. Curiosity without hunger, gravity without teeth. Someone's coming who belongs here. The trees parted. A woman stepped into the circle. She was small and very old, white hair braided close to her scalp, skin like paper that had been folded and unfolded 1,000 times. Her robe looked grown rather than sewn, moss, leaf, bark. But her eyes were young, clear, and hard as river glass. Ronan's voice dropped. Impossible. Hardly, the woman said, and her smile made the wrinkles at the corners of her mouth a map of laughter. We learned long ago that surviving often looks like hiding. She inclined her head to Elara. Child of the founding line. Elara's heart leapt into her throat. You're a druid, yes. The woman's gaze softened. My name is Mira. I was apprenticed to the last acknowledged druid before she died. When the hunts began, a few of us disappeared into the green places. We carried what memory we could and waited for the river to remember its daughters. 10 nights ago it did. Her eyes shone. You lit half the range when you woke, little one. I started walking then, and here you are. Ronan stepped half a pace forward, not blocking Elara exactly, but declaring the space. She is under my protection. Mira's brows twitched. So the stories say. An alpha king lifting a drowning witch from a river. There's a ballad in that somewhere. Her attention returned to Elara. I'm not here to take you away. I'm here to offer what he cannot. The wolf can teach you teeth. The water will teach you listening. You will need both. Ronan's jaw worked. She stays with me. She chooses, Mira corrected, gentle as a knife. That was always our law. Elara felt their gazes settle on her like twin weights. 2 worlds, 2 promises, 2 forms of safety. She looked at Ronan, at the steadiness that made space around her like a shield, and then at Mira, at the knowledge in those river glass eyes. I want to learn from you, she said to Mira, and watched the lines of Ronan's shoulders stiffen, then hold. But I won't leave his protection. Mira nodded, as if this had been the only wise answer. Then we layer our circles. I teach you by day, and when night comes the wolf keeps watch. He may observe our lessons. Ask your questions, Alpha. You guard. I guide. Conditions, Ronan said, still all iron. No binding, no oath, no trick that ties her to anyone but herself. Mira lifted both hands, palms open. No chains. Only consequences. She stepped forward. Ronan did too. For a breath, Elara thought they would circle one another like storms. Instead, Mira offered her right hand. We can seal the arrangement the old way. Visible to the grove, answerable to the land. Ronan hesitated. What does it cost? Truth. If either of us breaks our word where the girl is concerned, the land will remind us why we spoke it. Elara? Ronan asked without looking away from Mira. Your call. Elara studied the small, moss-stained hand and the big scarred one. Do it, she said. I like promises that aren't only human. Their palms met. Light flared. A quick, clean sting, like cold water splashed on a sleepy face. A sigil shimmered on each palm, silver as moonbeam, then sank into skin and was gone. Ronan flexed his hand once. I prefer contracts, I can see. You will, Mira said dryly. Every time you consider breaking it. For the first time since Mira appeared, a corner of Ronan's mouth lifted. Fair. Lesson by lesson, the afternoon thinned. Mira showed Elara how to listen to the water in her own blood, before listening to the pool, how to breathe so her body stopped mistaking power for fear, how to unhook her attention from the roaring river, and rest it on a single drop without stripping humidity from the air. Ronan watched, asked sharp questions, learned the shape of the work even if it didn't belong to him. When Elara's head ached and her hands shook with the effort of gentleness, Mira clapped once. Enough. Even springs must settle. Come back at dawn. Ronan arranged the journey back with a quiet efficiency Elara had learned meant he was thinking 3 moves ahead. They left the grove at last light. The forest changed voices around them. Twilight laid a cool hand on the back of Elara's neck. Halfway home, the wind shifted. Ronan stopped on the trail without sound, the way predators do when the world says listen. What is it? Elara whispered. Smoke, he said. And iron, south path. Mira cocked her head. Not wolves. No. Ronan's face went very still. Humans. They reached a rise where the trees thinned enough to see the valley. Torches licked at the dark orange wounds in the underbrush. Elara counted 6, 8, 10. The men moved like people who believed the night owed them favors. Ronan's hand touched her elbow. Back way home, quietly. Mira's voice was a thread. They're hunting. For me, Elara said. She didn't know how she knew. She just did. The knowledge tasted like brackish water and old rope. They took the long path, skirting ruin and torchlight. Ronan kept his body between Elara and every threat that had a heartbeat. Mira kept her attention on the living world itself, and the trees seemed to lean a little closer. The ground seemed to swallow their sound. By the time they slipped into the clearing where the cabin sat, the torches had veered toward the river, drawn by the lie it always offered, that it kept secrets. Inside, Ronan barred the door and stoked the fire low. "They'll sweep the banks, then the old game trail," he said. "We're safe for tonight." Mira took the chair by the hearth, as if it had always been hers. "They will come again tomorrow, and the day after. People who fail at killing often return to the scene of the failure." Elara stood, palms braced, on the edge of the table, trying to convince her hands they were not shaking. "I don't want anyone to die because of me." "Then learn fast," Mira said, not unkindly. "Mastery is mercy when the world is this afraid." Ronan crossed to Elara, and careful as drawing a bow, tilted her chin until she met his eyes. "No one dies here tonight," he said. "Not while I stand. Not while the grove remembers your name." Her throat tightened. "You sound very sure." "I am." A beat, and something softer entered his voice. "But I'm also a man who has been wrong before. So we will plan as if we are mortal and hope as if we are not." Mira made a pleased sound. There's a proverb in that. The night wore on. Elara dozed and woke and dozed again in the corner where furs made a nest. Once, she startled up from a dream of hands dragging her under, only to realize it was rain beginning outside. The first shy drop, then another, then 1,000. The roof sang, the stream answered. The river far off cleared its throat and began to tell the mountains what it had seen. Elara rose, drawn to the door. She cracked it open and let cool, wet air kiss her face. The rain touched her skin and didn't rush to obey. It settled. It blessed. Ronan appeared at her shoulder as if the room had grown him. "What does it say?" he asked. "That I'm not a mistake," she said, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. "That I'm an answer." He studied her a long breath, gold eyes gone almost gentle. "Then we answer back." He hesitated. "Elara, when we left the grove, I thought of a thing I should say plainly." She tipped her head. "Say it." "I didn't pull you from that river because the land needed you." His voice stayed low, steady. "I did it because I would not survive another failure like the one I told you about. I did it because you called me, and I chose to hear. If there is redemption in what I am doing, it is only valuable if it costs me my pride. So—" His mouth twitched, wry. "Consider some pride spent." Warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire. "Thank you," she said. It felt small beside the shape of what he'd given, but he received it like a gift nonetheless. Behind them, Mira cleared, her throat with the timing of a woman who had once been young and mischievous. "Sleep," she instructed briskly. "Tomorrow the river will want more proof you are who you say, and the council will not stay patient forever." Elara closed the door on the rain and leaned her back against it. "Let them come," she said, softer than bravado, firmer than fear. "I won't hide behind anyone's name, not anymore." "Good," Mira said. "Bring that spine to the spring at dawn." Ronan inclined his head, a smile barely there. "And bring that temper to me if anyone tries to take what's yours." Elara settled into the furs once more. The storm moved over the roof like a great slow animal, heavy with breath. Inside, the Alpha King sat where he could watch both door and window, a shadow with golden eyes. The old Druid slept with her palms turned up, as if receiving an invisible rain. Elara listened to the water until its many voices became one. Not the roar of drowning, not the whisper of fear, something in between. A word the world had been trying to teach her since the night she lived when she should have died. Choose. In the morning she would. Again and again. Until choice grew into a life. For now, she closed her eyes and let the storm keep time with her heart. Outside, the river remembered. Inside, the wolf kept watch. And between them, a girl, the world.